Hello, welcome to Manibil. I stumbled on this video, 10-month-old video on YouTube with Bernardo Kastrup and Rupert Spira, um, on something called Zencast or something like that. I'm not sure. I said there's a third guy there who's sort of interviewing these two dudes. And I'm not sure if who is sort of the responsible part here. I think it was on a channel by Rupert Spira, the guy on the lower left. So I thought I might, give this a deconstruction. I listened to some of it, and there was a few things that sort of, as I used to say, rubbed me the wrong way. So, and I only listened to like 10 or 15 minutes or something like that. This is sort of, I think it's 1.5 hour long. So it might be sort of a 30-part deconstruction series of mine. But before I dive in, I might mention that the last video I did was incredibly what's it called? Jittery, chucky, not chucky. What's it called? It's the frame rate is weird, right? And I thought I have to do something about it. So I found a guide about problems with Streamlabs on the Googles, and found a guide that check this and check that and try this setting and try that setting, right? I think the main change is that I went from software rendering to hardware rendering or something like that. And it seems to have solved basically all the problems. There might be a slight, now this is sort of, I haven't made a real test yet. I'm just saying this will probably work, right? But there might be a little delay between audio and mouth movement, or so. I don't know. It so far it looks decent, but let's see how it goes, right? So the title of this video is everything made of matter or consciousness? Rupert Spira, Bernardo Kastrup in discussion, right? Now, first off, right, it's presuppositional. I know it's a title, and then there's a clickbait and YouTube, and you have to catch people's attention and so on, right? But, just to clarify, right, it's presuppositional. Who says it's made of matter, or can be made of matter or consciousness, right? Who says that? Sort of, it's at least it's rubs against presupposition, right? Now, it also sounds like a potential false dichotomy. Who says there's only matter and consciousness, right? It's just, I know it's clickbait and that. So, and you have to condense things into something that is short and it can be understood quickly and so on, right? I'll let it pass, but I'm taking note, right? Because I think that even if people are aware that it is a clickbait title, they are still digesting titles like that is sort of poisoning the well or sweetening the well, or grooming you into have a preconceived idea what we are going to talk about and what the limitations are already before you have even heard a word uttered in the video, right? So just sort of, this is to extend the note I made in my Ask Me Anything video recently about deconstruction, that this kind of meticulous approach to deciphering what people are saying, and it's also, which can be sometimes a bit hard when you're doing this kind of deconstruction, to keep the helicopter view of what is being talked about, rather than being down in the groove and taking sentence by sentence and losing a bit of the overview, right? So you're doing this kind of deconstruction, you have to still elevate yourself to a helicopter view now and again to make sure that you have an overview of what you're doing, right, and what is being said. But one way to do that is keep being focused on on definitions and terms used, and how the sort of all of a sudden big leaps into something that is taken for granted or something like that, right? It's like when a term is being used to describe something particular, then that should be followed the rest of the philosophy or presentation of the philosophy. Can't just start using it to describe something else than what you originally did, right? So this sort of screwing around with the terms and so on. So just, I'm not saying they're necessarily doing that here, but you know, it's one of these things that to keep an eye out for, right? And when big leaps are being taken as if, of course, it's like this, right? Then when people say have a philosophy that is based on, of course, you should be up in arms, right? You should be, hey, hang on, mate, right? So, and the way to get to these points is by deconstructing it this way, as I'm doing here, in my opinion, right? That's at least my approach, right? So I can, I can recommend that if you want to try out something for yourself. And maybe it's also, maybe it's a good idea to have some fundamental philosophy of your own and have sort of been around most of the, if not all of the corners of philosophy that you can possibly get to before you start deconstructing, to avoid looking like a complete fool or something, like when you are, have developed your philosophy in the coming years and you're looking back on an earlier deconstruction and you're saying, holy shit, I didn't know what I was talking about back then, right? So, but if you're sort of fairly sort of on top of your own philosophy, it might be a good training to do this kind of deconstruction, right? And put it out on the YouTubes, hoping that Bernardo Kastrup is not going to call his thugs in the government to come and shoot you if you do things he doesn't like, right? Because he's so anxious, apparently, right? Okay, a little nudge there from my deconstruction of his analytic idealism course, which is basically the term they use for this kind of metaphysics that they're dealing with here, right? Okay, why don't we just jump in and see how it goes?
Rupert, Bernardo, lovely to see you both. Let me start with you, Rupert. How are you?
Very well. Lovely to see you, Simon and Bernardo.
Okay, moderated by... Okay, so it's actually Rupert Spira, I would think, who has set this up. And he's just a moderator. So they have somebody to talk to, sort of, rather than those two just talking to themselves. So they're sort of having a guy who pretends to interview them, sort of. Well, that's how I see it, right?
Good to see you. Lovely to see you again, too.
And Bernardo, you and I have never met, so I have to say it's an honor and a privilege. Are you well?
I'm doing well. Yeah, feeling good. Looking forward to this conversation.
I'm very much looking forward to it too. And there's that saying, there's nowhere I'd rather be. So on one hand, that takes care of time. However, on the other hand, obviously, time is pressing and we've got a lot to get on with. So let's dive straight in. And I want to ask my first question, which is, how and when did you first meet, the two of you?
We met in Amsterdam. Bernardo, you'll probably remember the date. It was on one of my... pre-COVID, I used to go to Amsterdam twice a year for a weekend.
Pre-COVID? Is COVID a part of the metaphysics? COVID, what is that? Is something you have experienced, or is it an abstraction, or what is it, right? What is it? What is it pre? It's pre. Then it's not a reference to time, right? So we're dealing with some point in time that is in the past, apparently, right? Because they must have met before this video here, right? So they're talking about the past, and it was pre-COVID. So COVID is something that can be experienced, or what? What is it? What is COVID, right? Because if COVID is a short term for apparently a virus, as far as I've heard, right? Now, is it, if you say pre-COVID, is it pre-virus? Because there are viruses all the time. There are viruses everywhere, right? So, what are you referring to, right? So you are already tapping into some kind of narrative, implying a narrative that is sort of outside yourself in this fashion, right? So what are you doing when you're doing metaphysics if you are just absorbing narratives that are handed to you, right? Why would I listen to your story? If you are just being infected with third-party stories about what is going on, right? Because if you can be fed stories, which are through your experiences, I would suppose, right? And take that as a story about what is going on the outside, why would I listen to your metaphysics if you are, listening to your experiences and letting your experiences tell you what is going on the outside without you having to experience it directly? An experience of a story is not the experience of the story, right? Already there, you see what I mean, right? You have to read between the lines with these kind of people, right?
And Bernardo and I had been in correspondence, and we met one Sunday evening for dinner at the end of my weekend. Do you remember which year it was, Bernardo?
I also don't remember.
5 years ago, was it?
Easily
5 or 6. It maybe even 7. Anyway, we met, and I think we already intuited that we had a lot in common. And it was one of those lovely meetings where there's almost no impediment to understanding. No need to explain your terms. No need to just immediately you.
Oh, so you don't need to explain terms. So it sounds like, it's annoying that you have to explain terms. It's better if you can just agree on stuff without having settled on the meaning of the terms, right? Even if you are agreeing on apparently agreeing about some conclusions in philosophy, you still need to settle on the terms, right? Even if you think you agree on the terms, you might not agree, right? If you haven't spelled it out. So I understand that there's some satisfaction, or what is the term? There's some. It's nice to meet people that is on the same page as you are, but I would encourage you to be careful. It's a bit like the old saying that keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. In this, it's sort of reversed, right? Keep your enemies close, but your friends closer, right? Be even more critical with those you potentially, or in the first, in your, what's the term I'm looking for? Your first impression sort of is that you agree with them. Then you are more likely to be infatuated by whatever woo-woo shit they have, right? And you're very likely also might be, I'm not saying, but I'm speaking from personal experience, right? You might be feeling a bit subordinate to that person, because they might, if they have been doing this kind of philosophy for a longer time and various stuff, that those you agree with, you are more likely to eat a bit of shit from them if the big picture is the same, right? It's like your favorite politician. You're more likely to look through, see through a few bad things that this politician does or says, if most of the other stuff they say you agree with, right? You're more likely to eat that little piece of shit there, right? Rather than if it was if there was the other politicians that you don't like, whatever little speck they mention that you don't like, you will point it out immediately, right? But those you agree with, nobody can agree 100% with anybody, in my opinion. You could, of course it's possible, right? It seems like it, right? But be careful you're not agreeing because you're agreeing about something that it's hard to find somebody else to agree with, right? Just be aware that you're not aligning yourself with, because you need friendship, you need somebody to talk to, and you're woo-woo, right? Just be careful.
Say half a sentence, and it's not necessary to complete it. The other one just knows immediately what you're saying. So it was one of these. It was very. Certainly for me, it was very special meeting Bernardo. Immediately, I felt it was like speaking to an old friend. The conversation just flowed so readily and so easily, and it was such a pleasure to meet someone who had come to this understanding in a completely different way from the way I had come to it, and yet there was such a deep.
I would like to have that spelled out, what those differences were, or each of the way that they arrived at. I think I have an idea, because Bernardo Kastrup has mentioned that this previously, sort of dealing with, I think, computer science is trying to think about artificial intelligence and how to understand these things, and then sort of at some point bumping into the hard problem and trying that sounds weird and try to explain that, and suddenly realizing that everything is actually turned on the head in the default thinking of metaphysics for normal human beings out there, right? So I would like to hear how Rupert Spira came to this, but let me see if he enlightens me.
Shared understanding and resonance.
Shared understanding. Now, I'm not particularly fond of this idea of shared things, right? Is an agreement the same as an agreement about opinions, let's say, right? Or thinking or something like that. Is that the same as shared? If we agree, we don't necessarily share it, because when it's shared, it sort of starts to smell like communism, right? To me, at least, right? Or any kind of totalitarian collectivist mentality, right? It's shared, then it's like the cookie jar that everybody has to have a cookie from. It's shared cookies. No. If we each have a cookie, we can say we all have the same cookie. But when it's shared, it's sort of everything is in the cookie jar, and then somebody has to hand out cookies, right? It's just this kind of, there's 80% of what is being said by human beings is understood implicitly in how it is said and the terms used, rather than, a strict meaning of the term, maybe, right? And a good philosopher, in my opinion, is someone who constantly strives towards making sure that the same term is used all the time and that there's a good understanding what is meant by the term, right? A shared thinking or opinion, or what is it shared because they have the same, right? So it's also, there's always this, and I'm cycling a bit here, right? But it's this, we have to drag it into the pool of shared stuff, right? We have to bring people together and make sure they stay here and don't run away, because they might run away with the stuff I need, and anxiety. It's shared. So if you're not taking part, you're taking away from the sharedness, or you're just outside and you don't want to participate. And you can, as soon as the term shared is being used, you're being dragged into communism, in my opinion, right?
You've clearly developed a beautiful friendship. And what is interesting, as you mentioned there, Rupert, is that where you have arrived in your understanding of reality, your lived experience of it, and that it's come from these two very apparently different directions. You could say, for example, Rupert, that I think a lot of people would think of you as in spiritual terms, I think. And Bernardo, I mean...
Okay. Yeah. Spiritual. Oh, man. As soon as I hear the term spiritual, right, it's like, Oh, it's like waving, garlic at Dracula, right? What is it, Frankenstein? No, it's not. It's not Frankenstein. It is Dracula, or it's like spirituality, right?
Your background is very much, was certainly initially very much hard science. I mean, you worked at CERN at the Hadron Collider. So actually, could you just give us a bit of give me as much as anyone else a bit of a backdrop of you?
Hard science? What's the difference between science and hard science? Why do we have to have that differentiation? What's the difference? Hard science? Is it because it's a hard-on collider or what? So it's hard science on the hard-on, the huge hard-on collider, right? Oh yeah, I get there's a lot of these academic parasites who siphon off taxation from the poor people in order to run their stupid experiments down in that fucking carousel in Switzerland, whatever, right? And there's probably some smart ass thing going, because I think it runs between Italy and Switzerland and Austria. It's like a big, so it's not in one country, right? So it's like yeah, but then there's something about that it goes between more than one it's underground, and it's between more than one country, so that one country can't blame because then the other country might, and something like that, right? There's something, the higher echelons of the power structure that has, I mean, I think it's one big fucking, Illuminati, death cult, deep state bullshit going on there, right? Who in the freaking wide world would, freely fund something where you are smashing atoms together? I mean, who the fuck would fund that rather than, having a bit more to buy, a Greek salad on your summer vacation with your children, right? Who would fund shit like that? And if they want to fund it, fine. But don't force the fucking poor people to fund your, fanciful fantasies about the quantum realm, right? Fuck off, man. It should be destroyed immediately, this CERN shit, right? And that goes for all the other shit that is funded by forcing poor people to pay for it, in my opinion.
Your scientific credentials, if you may.
Okay, my original education was in computer science, but I very quickly, immediately after my graduation, found myself working in a large physics experiment, doing part of the data acquisition system for the Atlas experiment of the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Switzerland. Started thinking about artificial intelligence, because it was one of the techniques we were working on in order to recognize relevant physics events from the data stream and separating those events from the sort of the trash, the background that any physics experiment generates. After that, I started thinking about, well, if I can build an AI, can I build an AC, an artificially conscious entity? And then that got me back to philosophy, which was something I was interested on, I don't know, since birth. I don't remember not being interested in philosophy. And then got a second doctorate in philosophy, started thinking about the deep questions, especially when you get to a point in life where you already carved out a space in the world for you, so you're not in that desperate need for, how to say, having a place to live and having a good job and a partner and a dog and a cat and all that. And then suddenly I find myself here next to Rupert, which is for me a massive cosmic irony. It's like God looking at me, having a laugh and saying, haha, you didn't see this one coming, did you? Because I never thought of myself as even remotely spiritually talented, so to say. I still don't think myself that way. I still think it's deep inside. I
still don't. That implies that you have an ambition to become so, right? So you have an ambition to become spiritual, which sounds like a priest to me, right? You want to be a preacher of idealism or something like that, rather than a philosopher. I am still not, right? Read between the lines. It's not that difficult, really, right? You just have to listen and, deconstruct it, right? Word by word, sentence by sentence, and so on, right? So I don't like this kind of let's just get, as the interviewer said, let's get down to business, right? Let's just get down to definitions and understanding, straight to the point. All the bullshit about, hey, we met in Amsterdam when we were looking at hookers and having a joint. Hey, it was great, and we didn't have to define anything. We were just, yay, we were pals, right? And all this sort of sentimental shit. And it's sort of a woo-woo feeling I get with these people, right? It's my personal expression of my experience, right? But having done a few listens to these people, right? Bernardo and maybe us a little about Rupert Spira before, but I think he's so woo-woo to me that what I remember listening a few years back, right? I would prefer Bernardo Kastrup if I had to choose between these two, right? He sounds like, woo-woo dude, right? All out.
Feel slightly ashamed for being next to Rupert in a situation like this. Having a dinner with Rupert is something else. That's a situation in which I'm in learning mode.
So he is subordinate, right? As I mentioned earlier about, we are on the same page, so I am subordinate to my big, the cult leader of idealism, right? The guru, right? That's not a good mentality, Bernardo, right? You're not subordinate to anybody. You have your own fucking philosophy to deal with, right? Don't subordinate yourself to any kind of thinking, man. If the 20th century taught anybody anything, it's not subordinating you to anything, right? It should be rocket individualism in that sense. You are rocket philosophically independent. Don't depend on anybody. And I'm saying to you, don't depend on me, right? Think fucking for yourself, man, right?
Appear as an equal next to Rupert is a massive cosmic irony for me.
That's beautiful.
Cosmic irony. Oh, the babe, we are tapping into the cosmos, man, right? Oh, they're grooming you with these words, right? And all the people who are sensitive to this kind of woo-woo shit, they're using the word cosmic, and they love it. It's just water on their mill, right?
I just said something quickly, Simon, to that is that what's also ironical is that you say, Bernardo, that you don't really feel that you're kind of spiritual or qualified in that way, but I don't feel myself that I'm a spiritual person. I dislike intensely the label spiritual teacher, because the word spiritual implies something sort of something other.
Yeah.
Something, I'm talking about not something other, I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
This ordinary, everyday experience. So.
All right. Well, that sounds good to me, right? So, what about that cosmic stuff mentioned before? Let's see if he sticks to that, because that's not my impression of what they're talking about in this Essentia Foundation. All that very quickly gets to be God and the big mind out there, and we're just insignificant little subjectivities of the big subjectivity and whatever bullshit, right? That doesn't sound like this experience to me, to be honest. Right now, I'm sort of what's it called? My vocabulary is not functioning too well today. Apparently, I'm not presupposing, but I'm taking for granted that this is what they're going to say. So I'm sort of a bit ahead of the discussion here, right? But I'm just, I'm trying to understand what they're saying now here at this point that Rupert says that is potentially going to be violated later. But I'll just have something to point out then, at least, right?
I actually, I rather agree with you, Bernardo. I don't feel spiritual. I just feel like an ordinary person that's interested in the reality of our ordinary everyday experience.
Our ordinary. Why doesn't he say my? I know. See, I use the term, misuse the term our sometimes in order to extend that I don't feel that it's only me having an experience. But sometimes it would be nice if people talking about not our experience, because if it's an our experience, right, then it's not your experience, right? It can't be both, right? It can't both be your experience and our experience, right? And then he should, when he says our, then he should say, well, when I say our, I mean my experience, which I then axiomatically extend to other individuals within my experience having the same kind of experience, though I do not have access to it because what is called the problem of other minds, right? So the way they start off this is too much woo-woo and too much fluffiness for my taste, to be honest, right? And as you know, this first time I haven't said that right, but I just have to point it out again and again and again, apparently.
Yeah.
Let me share that. I'm also interested in this world right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, Bernardo, I have said that he was sort of spiritual, but he doesn't like that. My master didn't like that. Oh no, I'm correcting it now. No, I mean, I also mean here and now, of course, because I have to agree with Rupert, right? He's my master. He's my guru. Oh, you went a little bit ahead of yourself there, right? And your master had to correct you in a nice way, right? Hey, get back in place. I'm not a spiritual guy, right? Oh, of course you're not. No, you are interested in the here and now, right? Oh, man.
Yes, so I think that's where
So basically, the Essentia Foundation, Bernardo, which is the executive officer, and Rupert Spira is apparently the woo-woo officer, the spiritual. They don't even have a common ground on spiritualism, right? In their foundation. Give me a break, man, right? Fuck off.
That's where we meet. Yes.
And that's why this is so exciting, because spiritual is something of a loaded word, particularly, let's say, in scientific circles. And so to be able to bring the two together, really, in terms of pure experience, it is very exciting. Now, just to, in terms of my own qualifications, as it were, I'm uniquely unqualified. I failed my physics GCSE, which.
Oh, so you're bowing down in the grovel and saying, "You masters, I'm not worthy of being in your presence because I'm so stupid. I'm just here to ask questions you told me to ask." Rupert Spira and Bernardo Kastrup, they're sitting there smiling. They said, no, you're not insignificant. You can do a philosophy just like we can. We're not some kind of, divine intervention tapping into the big, database of philosophy or whatever. Right? Is that the kind of person they want you to be, right? Isn't that guy with the headphones up there, isn't he sort of a, implicit representative of me as a listener and you as a listener out there, right? Who's saying, I'm so stupid. I just have to listen to these big thinkers, right? Who are spiritual. No, they're not spiritual. No, you're not Negro spirituals. They're into right here, right now, right? I don't understand. I'm just here to ask questions and wearing a headset, right?
Means that, so to be able to explore these terms, particularly perhaps from a scientific point of view, I'm hoping to bring you down to my level. Now,
Why are they not stopping him as saying, no? But so, I mean, have they asked this idiot who's apparently saying, I'm an idiot. I'm a fucking idiot. I don't know shit from fuck, right? I don't know shit about fuck, right? And of course he would be perfect to interview us. So they're basically saying, you out there listening to this shit, you are an idiot, right? You're on the same level of him. He has to bring them down to his level down. They're up there, in the ivory godlike tower, right? These two smirky dudes, right? He has to bring them down to his level. Oh, no. Hell.
In terms of the man or woman in the street and their understanding.
Oh, the peasants, you mean, right? These idiots out there, how do we get them to understand this? Right?
Of reality, of experience, of science. Someone at the moment here in Britain who is very much the figurehead in that area is Brian Cox. Now, he, you could say, is a celebrity physicist. He worked at CERN as well. In terms of, for example,
Apparently one Cox wasn't enough, so it has to be Brian Cox. He needs more than one. Oh, just kidding.
The amount of publications you've had written about in idealism in scientific papers, how would you compare you?
Idealism in scientific papers, it basically says everything you need to know about Bernardo Kastrup, right? Idealism is not science. I mean, he would say that himself. Science tells you how things work, how it pans out in the future, and can possibly help you predict it without using, opening up chickens and so on and looking at the entrails, right? And metaphysics is that which makes you able to talk about physics, right? That's physics can tell you what happens if you throw an elephant off the tower, right? How long would it take before it splats out on the floor or pavement, right? But science cannot tell you what an elephant is. You can measure it all you want, but that doesn't tell you what it is, right? Because a measurement is just a comparison with some other object you don't know what is, right? The Egyptian used the lower part of the arm as a measure stick. How many arms is this pyramid long, right? So they measured with their underarm. What's it called? So many, but it doesn't explain what the underarm is. It doesn't explain what the pyramid is. But the pyramid is 700 arms long, right? Or 180 arms long, something like that, right? It doesn't explain what a pyramid is, right? But science is measuring and doing stuff like shit like that, right? And trying to predict what is going to happen to the elephant if you throw it from the pyramid. But it doesn't explain neither underarm or pyramid or elephant. Now, if you think that metaphysics is going to help you explain what an elephant is, you're an idiot. Because it can't, right? You cannot explain what an elephant is or a pyramid, right? You can only explain how it was created, for instance. And there was used this many rocks and it is so long compared to this arm and so on, right? Scientifically. You can't explain what it is because it's a cognition. And there's no explanation for the cognitions, right? So if he thinks that metaphysics attempts to explain what an elephant is, he's wrong, right? And then he sort of, no, but then I just use my science. No. He would say himself that you can't use science to explain anything, man, right? So what is he doing talking about metaphysics in scientific newspapers, right? It's just all, it's all wrong. It's all a miscreant of so futile attempts to, if I can't explain science with science, I'm going to use metaphysics, and if I can't explain the metaphysics, I'm going to take some science, and it's sort of jumping between these two camps and trying to combine them in some kind of weird Frankenstein monster of a philosophy. It doesn't work, man.
And Brian, and I don't mean to be in any way leading, but just out of interest.
Well, Brian worked at CERN as well at some point, I think. I don't have much sympathy for him, even in his efforts to communicate physics. I think he's more focused on drawing a flabbergasted reaction from his public than to actually explain what's going on. I'm more focused on the, whoa, wow, what is this? What does quantum physics mean? Than actually explaining things.
Actually explain? I would like to. What does it mean to explain? If I asked him, can you explain elephant, Bernardo? Please explain elephant. What would he say? Well, he says it has shapes, it has sounds, and it has colors, and it has smells. But that's just experience, right? That's not explained. Then you have to explain the colors and the sounds, and well, then we're running into the hard problem, right? Apparently, presumably, right? Then we can't explain any further because we are stuck behind the wall of experience. So how do you explain anything? And you can't explain the colors and the sound, they're just there. You can't. How do you explain yellow, for instance, right? You can only say it's the same color as this object has over here. But that's a circular argument, right? You can't explain experiences. And if elephants and all these shapes and geometry and science and all this is some kind of derivative from an experience, then the experiences are at the ground floor. They're the reduction base then, right? You can't get around it. And you can't explain the reduction base. Well, if elephant is based on my inexplicable reduction base, that means the elephant can't even explain either, right? It's not that difficult. It's just because, no. We can't stay here behind our wall of experience. We have to go on the other side and explain there are ripples and there are subjectivities and right? Because otherwise we are anxious. We have more anxiety if we don't know what is behind experience.
And he seems to be married to a particular metaphysics without even thinking of it as a metaphysics. And that metaphysics is, of course, physicalism or materialism.
And metaphysics, again, for...
Well, yeah. It's an old problem, right? I have pounded on this before, right? But the default setting for a human being, I believe, is materialism or physicalism, as they call it, right? The default setting, you chew on stuff and you touch stuff and you crawl around and you fall from the tree and experience as if that experience is an outside. It makes totally sense, common sense in a way, right? But then you never grow out of that unless you start to think about it and run into this paradox that you can't experience an outside if it's an experience inside, right? And if it's only an experience inside that you have access to, how do you get to say that's an outside? Because it's all an inside, apparently, right? And then you can also say, why am I talking about this inside-outside dichotomy? Where the hell does that come from? Is it just my, habitual thinking or things that I've been, indoctrinated to understand this way and then just followed it because somebody told me? Somebody told me there's a pandemic. So there's a pandemic because I was told, right? bad metaphysics, right? So when you realize there is a contradiction or a paradox, however you want to look at it, right? I would call it a paradox. That your experience cannot, if you have an experience, it has to be in your mind, so to say, right? And if you say that experience, for instance, an elephant is outside, what are you referring to? Because that experience must be in your mind, otherwise you wouldn't have it, right? You can't have an experience outside your mind, right? I can't be outside my living room, right? I am inside my living room. So if I'm an experience of an outside, I can't be out there because I'm here, right? I don't know, maybe a bad analogy, but, and then you say, but if my experience is purely in my mind and I'm talking about this inside-outside dichotomy, and I want that dichotomy, I establish it axiomatically, then what I may have access to can merely be some kind of representation of that which I call an outside, though I can never get to that outside, because I need my experiences in order to have anything, right? And then the big elephant in the room, to stay in the elephant analogy, is, then what the hell is out there, right? But Kant said, and it's a fairly good, sort of poetic description, it's an infinite ocean. It's an infinite dark ocean without a shore. Something like that. I'm paraphrasing a bit. Something like that, right? That's not a too bad analogy. Though it's not, the darkness is an experience, right? Ocean is an experience. Infinite is an experience, an idea at least, right? Based on experiences. But he's using that as an analogy in order to say to you, you cannot get there, right? Because you need your experiences. And this you're talking about is by definition beyond experience, right? So whatever strange abstraction you can come up with will always be some kind of derivative from your experiences. And that is even worse than experience, because I would say the experiences is in itself directly closer to whatever it is. Your derivatives from your experiences is sort of second echelon of derivatives, right? The experience is some kind of derivative of the thing itself, and your abstractions and conditions and ideas and models is a further derivative of your experiences. How could those ripples and whatever abstractions you can come up with be any kind of representation of that which is beyond experiences? No, it can't, right? It's ridiculous to claim that.
Or someone like me, so that just means reality, a model of reality.
Yeah, metaphysics is what it...
Why do you create a model? But why do you need a model? Start with the reduction base. Start with the starting point. What is the starting point? We can always go back to the drawing board. We can always go back to the starting point and say, this is where we start. And then make a fucking good argument for why you're starting there. Right? We have to create a model. No. Stick your models where the sun don't shine, right? Start with the reduction base. And I would prefer if the reduction base was something that I personally had direct access to. Otherwise, I would think that you are out to shit me, right? You're out to confuse me and manipulate me. If you're staying in the clouds of abstractions and models and so on, and try to convince me it's all ripples and something like that, right? Fuck off, man, right? I have to be able to experience it myself. Otherwise, you're a mystic, manipulative sophist, right?
Is behind physics. Physics is how nature behaves. Metaphysics is what is it that behaves. So it's behind the physics or beyond the physics.
Yeah, so am I right in saying science...
What is it that behaves? Maybe that dichotomy is a little too simplistic. It might be, I think I understand, but... Well, if the elephant behaves by falling from the tower, right? Then what is behaving is the elephant and the tower and the person pushing, right? But that doesn't explain. If I say the elephant is moving, the elephant is behaving, I'm not explaining elephant, right? I'm just saying it's an elephant that is, and it could be a rock or a tree or a mammoth falling from the tower, right? It would do the same kind of physics, more or less, right? Depending on, friction and whatever shit, right? It's implied that his metaphysics is going to explain to me what an elephant is. That's basically what I'm hearing, and I reject that outright because he can't.
Doesn't tell us what reality is, but it tells us how it behaves.
Correct. Of course, you can derive some implications regarding what nature is from nature's behavior, but that's an indirect step. Science doesn't provide a direct answer to what nature is.
What is that? Can you derive some existence from behavior? Explanation of the existence from behavior? If I throw an elephant from a tower, can I explain elephants somehow by that? It's just an example. I like to use the elephant, right? I don't see how you get to that.
Since it only studies nature's behavior.
Okay. Now, Rupert, in terms of then the perennial understanding, as it were, so does this then explain what reality is in a way that science can't?
Good question.
Yes, the perennial...
You're not that stupid, right? You should bring them up on your level, mate, right? Because they're not too smart when it all comes down, right? You are more sort of connected to reality, right? So stay with that notion.
Understanding is really more a philosophy than a science, because philosophy is more concerned with what nature is rather than what it does. So the perennial non-dual...
Well, I have to deconstruct this, right? Science is an offspring of philosophy, right? It used to be that everything you can possibly think about is philosophy, right? Now, describing the experiences and our abstractions of the experience and how they move about, called physics, has sort of been, and physics and all, chemistry, all that shit, right? Scientific aspects have been sort of quartered off, or what is called, right? You can sit over there and calculate, right? Shut up and calculate, right? And we'll do the rest of the thinking over here, philosophy, right? So they're just sort of an offspring of some nerds that like to use their pocket calculator, right? And sit over there and look at stuff, banging atoms together in a multi-trillion, gazillion euro, instrument that nobody gives a shit about, right? They go and do that and spend all our money so we can't get a summer vacation with our children, right? And we will think over here about the rest of the stuff. Now, it's not like science is competing with philosophy. Philosophy is the king, right? Science is an offspring. It's a weird little nerdy cousin, right?
Understanding is an attempt to both explore the nature of reality, to recognize the nature of reality, and then it addresses the implications of that recognition in...
The implications. Yes, it's like if you have an understanding of your experience, which is basically what you're doing when you're doing metaphysics. This is how I classify my experience and understanding and create some axioms and definitions and whatever, right? Come up with an idea of knowledge and so on. What are the implications? Do you need to tell somebody else about the implications? Because it starts to, may be a little ahead of the story here, right? But it starts to sound like, well, I've come up with some conclusions here. And I need to create a foundation that needs to, missionary out in the world and tell people, this is how it should be understood. These are the implications. Do this or the heavens will fall. It starts to reek of that, right?
in our life, both internally, that is, what it means for us internally in relation to our suffering, our love of happiness and peace, our internal
suffering? Suffering and happiness. Okay.
Emotional experience, but it also has implications for our external experience, that is, our activities and relationships in the world.
Is that oh, external experience? You cannot have an external experience. External to what? Your experience must be in you, right? Within your mind. It's an experience, internal experience about something that is external, right? That which you say, this is a representation of something outside my mind. This part, I have an experience, I have a emotional attachment or derive some emotion from this aspect I call an external. But that doesn't make the emotion external, right? Just be clear in your statements here, mate.
You often say reality is one single indivisible whole, and so there's nothing set.
So this is one of these jumps, right? So now we're jumping into everything is one thing. Everything is one thing, right? It's like, okay, yeah. I met him in channels of Amsterdam. We were going to look at some hookers, right? And hey man, hey, it's all cosmic, man, hey. And it's all one big thing, right? Hey, it's all one big thing, and I have to give you the implications. Okay, maybe I'm a little premature here, right? But we're getting close to the 1 hour mark. I think I will leave it here at 10:30 or something like that, 10 minutes and 30. So that means we are going to have about 10 episodes of deconstruction here. Well, it's nice to have something to do. Well, if you like this stuff, give me a share, like, and subscribe, right? Give me a comment, or, if you're really hooked on this, I wouldn't mind having a donation. And if some of these links I've given you don't work, if some of it doesn't work, please let me know, right? If you want to help out. So otherwise, see you in the next one. Have a nice day.